Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Hello and welcome to Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. I'm Becky Parker Geist and I'm your host. Audiobook Connection is your place to learn about the audiobook creative process and for authors to learn valuable tips on producing and marketing your audiobooks. This podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. We're going to focus today on children's books and talk about some of the benefits of doing a children's audiobook and also some of your options that can help you as you think about the production of that audiobook. First of all, in terms of audiobook sales and trends, the children's audio is still quite a small percentage of the overall audiobook sales, around 3% of sales. And you could look at that and say, oh, well, then I shouldn't do it. But when I look at that, I see a huge opportunity. First of all, the age demographic for parents of young kids who would be listening to children's audiobooks is exploding. And a large majority of audiobook listeners fall within that age demographic. And since, of course, if you're an author who does children's books, you recognize that you're selling to the parents, not to the kids. Of course, the kids need to enjoy it, or you're best off if they do, but you're really marketing to the parents. So here we have an age demographic of people who are listening to audiobooks and also have kids, and so the likelihood grows that they would also be interested in and looking for content for their kids in the audiobook world. Also, the fact that there are so few, relatively speaking, children's books available in the audiobook format, that again increases your potential and the opportunity as the author of a children's audiobook. So I wanted to bring those out. As I see it, I'm expecting that the children's audiobooks are going to really make some significant growth over the next several years. Some of the reasons why parents are attracted to audiobooks for their kids, there are a number of reasons, and some of them are specific to the times that we're living in. And what I mean by that is times when screen time is a big issue, and also with the pandemic, that has added certain stressors that naturally lead to parents looking for other kinds of resources as entertainment and education for their kids. So here are some specific benefits of audiobooks for children that you should be thinking about, because if you recognize the value that you're providing with your children's audiobook, that will then allow you to help you reach your market more effectively. So one of those is bedtime stories, especially with the lights out. Many parents struggle with creating an effective bedtime routine for their kids, and that can be for any number of reasons. It can be fears of the children, or just it's hard for them to settle down. But having an audiobook that you can turn on with the lights out or with just night lights, whatever that aspect of your routine is, for many kids, that can ease them into sleep much more easily. And for exhausted parents at the end of a long day with young kids, that can be incredibly valuable. This is something that we've implemented in our own family with my 2 young granddaughters who would have a hard time getting settled in for the night and keep wanting to have their parents engaging with them even after lights were out and it was time for them to settle down for sleep. By adding a lights out audiobook, it has allowed the kids to settle in much more easily. So audiobooks are excellent bedtime resource. They're also excellent at moments when children, for example, need to be in a car seat or strapped in some way, and that can cause them to feel restless and frustrated, and they don't like to sit in the car seat. Having a story that they can listen to takes their mind off of that and allows them to, travel in their imagination in ways that make that car trip a whole lot more pleasant for everyone. There are some other interesting benefits from just listening to a story. One of those is stimulating the imagination of young minds. And I want to reference a time I was talking with my 4-year-old granddaughter, and she had been listening to an audiobook of a book that I wrote for my kids when they were young. And so she hadn't ever seen the book. She had only heard it. And she was telling me, she came over and she said she wanted to see the book because she had imagined these pictures in her mind and she wanted to see what the book looked like. In this particular case, the book was designed to be what I call an illustrating book, which means that I created it as a personalized book for each of my children and with blank spaces so that they could color or illustrate the book themselves. So even though in this particular case, there were not images existing for her to compare to, what was fascinating to me and that she really pointed out to me was that the story itself had stimulated her imagination to create these pictures in her mind. And these days, especially with the pandemic, with parents feeling overwhelmed with trying to keep the family safe, working from home or working, in their work environment, which can be more stressful because of the pandemic. And then school having been often virtual or sometimes open, sometimes closed, depending on whether there have been COVID cases. And then also fewer options for going out for entertainment and activities and trying to monitor kids' screen time as well. All of this has created additional challenges to already the challenge just of being parents. So having resources, providing resources for parents in these times is really, really valuable. And just to stress again, because of the pandemic, that there has been an increase in the need for screen time for kids as a general rule, especially school-age kids. And that because of that increase, that need for kids to be on screens more, we all the more need options for them to not be on screens and still be able to take in enjoyable stories, entertainment, education through audio alone. And then, of course, another benefit can be that for early readers, audiobooks can be used as a kind of read-along experience. So if they have a print edition of some kind, that they can listen to the audiobook, the story, as they're looking at the text. This can really help kids with comprehension, with vocabulary, because it is putting context, and also especially with reading fluency. So there are lots of benefits to audiobooks for kids, and also lots of reasons why I foresee a lot of growth in the children's books genre. And I want to bring up just one more thing before we take our break, and that is that the benefit to you as an author, the opportunity to do an audio first edition of your book. One of the large expenses, of course, of doing a children's book is the illustrations. Having an audiobook edition created can be considerably less than the illustration process, which means if you haven't published your book yet and it hasn't been illustrated yet, you could still get it into audio and have an excellent product out there without incurring the expenses of the illustrations. You would, of course, have the expense of the audio production, but with a really short book, like a children's book, that can be considerably less, as I said, than illustrations. Okay, let's take a short pause, and when we come back, we'll talk about some of your options for children's audiobooks.
Looking for a way to bring your children's book to life in an engaging way for young ones? At Pro Audio Voices, we bring together decades of experience with audio production, teaching, and parenting to craft a listening experience that will delight children and parents alike. If you're looking for an experienced team to bring your children's book to life in audio, check out proaudiovoices.com.
All right, so if you have a book for very young children with very few words, here are some options to consider. You could do an audio first or audio only. As a kind of footnote to that, audiobook digital distribution does require having some other format of your book already available. Now, the workaround for that, the simplest one, is to create an ebook pre-order. Once your pre-order is live, then the audiobook can go forward and into distribution. You can then cancel the pre-order, or if you want to go forward with it, you certainly can do that. Now, there is one slight penalty on Amazon if you do cancel a pre-order, and that currently is that if you were to try to do another pre-order after you have already canceled one, that for the next year, they won't let you do another pre-order because they don't want you bailing on projects that you're promising to potential customers. But of course, if you're going to only do audio, that is not a penalty at all. So there are some workarounds, and if you have questions about that, please do reach out to us at Pro Audio Voices, and we can talk through what the issues are and what would be your best option. But going back to the main point here, the end of our footnote, if you will, you can do an audio first or an audio only version of your audiobook. If you do that, it allows you, kind of opens the door to expanding the story if you would like to. Because when we think about print books for young children, we are limited in many ways by what is appropriate for that genre in print. But in audio, it's a different ballgame, right? So again, we think back to like bedtime stories, it can be helpful to have the story last a little bit longer. It's a different kind of experience that we're creating. If you do choose to expand your story or modify it in any way, I would encourage you to think about using words that are sound rich. So that's things that would reference, say, for example, the birds or other sounds that the characters in the story might be hearing. There are many children's books that are not really creating a rich audio soundscape in the text of the story. And so when we take on a project like that, we're looking at the illustrations to try to gather some possibilities for sound effects that we might include that would be appropriate to the story, but the story is not actually referencing. But if you have a child in the story walking down the street and you reference things that they're hearing, that creates that opportunity for a terrific soundscape. If your target market and your book itself you think would be really good for a read-along kind of experience for young readers, but your book is not published yet, you could employ that idea of adding in some more sound-rich words in your text if you're planning to also do it as an audiobook. And then once it is published, or with a read-along kind of book you have already published, then it is really important that the narrator be word perfect. You really need that perfect accuracy for those kids' books where you're expecting to have that kind of read-along possibility. Still, you can add in music and sound effects to help bring it to life, and we really encourage that at Pro Audio Voices. As a general rule, for children's books, for storybooks, then we do recommend incorporating music and sound effects. For early reader kinds of books that are, for example, early chapter books, we might not. So it really depends on your particular project and your audience and what we think will be the very best to bring it to life. We're going to call that a wrap for today, but in an upcoming episode, we're going to talk more about some of your marketing options for children's audiobooks, things that you could consider for added value, and ways to entice your audience, in this case, the parents, as well as the children, to visit you online at your website and to gain more from that experience, to engage with you on an ongoing basis. Thanks so much for being with me today. And as always, if you have questions, please reach out to us at proaudiovoices.com. We look forward to talking with you about your project. Thanks for joining us for Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. Please take a moment to subscribe at audiobookconnection.com. The podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Learn more at proaudiovoices.com. Again, thanks for being with us, and please join us next week.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.